Imagine boots on damp stone, the echo swallowed by midnight. A sealed door opens. Men in uniform step into a small, windowless room where a woman sits awake with a child in her lap. They carry a warrant and a cold certainty. The boy must be taken from his mother. Stay with me. This is not the moment of the blade. This is the moment that precedes it. The first surgical cut of a campaign meant not simply to kill a person, but to strip away everything that made her human. The terrifying truth about Marie Antoinette's last moments before the guillotine is not the final second when the blade fell. It is the long, deliberate campaign of psychological warfare that began the moment her son was taken and continued through weeks of humiliation, staged spectacle, and coerced testimony designed to erase a name and destroy a soul. By the time the cart carried her to the Place de la Révolution on October 16, 1793, she had been a prisoner for 76 days. In those weeks, the revolutionaries did not merely await her execution, they prepared it like a performance, and their preparations were aimed first at the heart she could not hide, her motherhood. We need to set the record straight. Much of what the public remembers of Marie Antoinette is caricature, the foreign queen who supposedly said, "Let them eat cake," a woman of extravagance and indifference. That phrase is almost certainly apocryphal. She was Austrian by birth, married at 15 as part of a dynastic bargain. By the 1790s, she had been queen, widow, and mother, bereaved of an eldest child, and isolated by history and politics. The Versailles pageantry and scandal had made her an easy symbol for revolutionary anger, yet by 1793, the woman sitting in the squalor of revolutionary prisons was primarily a mother who had already endured loss and displacement. So how did revolutionary justice shift from politics to psychological destruction? How did a regime that had trucked people to the scaffold begin to weaponize intimacy, to use love itself as an instrument of domination? Sources from the period, including the memoirs of Marie Thérèse, her surviving daughter, trial records, and later historical studies, point to a strategy of slow, humiliating attrition. The objective was not only to punish a queen for alleged crimes against the nation, but to dismantle the private identity that tied her to public sympathy. The temple, where the royal family were confined after August 1792, was a place built to suffocate identity. Candlelight revealed damp stone and narrow staircases. Guards kept an ever-present watch. Their rules were exacting. Language was controlled so that the younger children would be forced to adopt the revolutionary tongue. Visitors were restricted and monitored. News from the outside was filtered or falsified. The effect was to isolate and infantilize, to replace family networks with the cold routine of surveillance.
For Marie Antoinette, the deprivation had another dimension: her children. Revolutionary authorities first separated members of the royal household under the pretense of security and re-education. Their instruments ranged from bureaucratic decrees to deliberate cruelty. The most devastating blow came on the night the custodians of the boy Louis Charles arrived to remove him. According to Marie Thérèse's memoirs and contemporary accounts, there was no subtle handover. The removal was an extraction. Reconstructing that night from the available testimony is gruesomely precise in its small moments and careful in its detail. Guards presented papers and demanded compliance. A mother refused. The record, filtered through memory and the trauma of witnesses, suggests an hour-long struggle. Marie Thérèse watched as her mother fought to keep the child. She tore at the soldiers, she pleaded, she tried to shield him. The boy screamed. The guards, trained for this kind of resistance, were prepared to answer with force. At last, the child was wrenched away. He would never return to his mother's arms. This abduction should be understood as more than a single cruelty. It was a hinge. If starvation, confinement, and ridicule had failed to produce the public spectacle of disintegration the revolutionaries wanted, the weaponization of the child would do what insults and hunger could not. It would expose a private bond to public manipulation and create a tool for coercion. That tool was the boy himself. From the moment he left the temple with a guardian appointed by revolutionary authorities, his identity was shaped to serve the tribunal. Antoine Simon, a cobbler with revolutionary credentials, was assigned as the boy's custodian, a man tasked with educating the child in manners dictated by the Committee of Public Safety. The intention was not gentle mentorship. Contemporary records and later historiography describe a program of reconditioning, enforced language change, daily humiliations, and routine surveillance. The child's name and title were gradually stripped. He was addressed as the child or reduced to a number. The aim was to detach him from his royal identity and to manufacture a testimony useful to prosecutors. Treat this with care. The most infamous accusation used at Marie Antoinette's trial, an allegation of incest between mother and son, rests on testimony extracted in this coercive environment. Trial records show that statements were produced under conditions that modern observers call into question. Witnesses were threatened, interrogation methods were severe, and the atmosphere of the tribunal was primed for spectacle. The confession or assertions attributed to the boy cannot be read as a straightforward, reliable account. They must be read as a product of a system designed to elicit a desired outcome. After the abduction, Marie Antoinette's transfer to the conciergerie completed the process of dehumanization.
Arrested women and men were assigned numbers. On September 2, she was given the number 280. The label reduced a queen to an administrative entry in a ledger. In the conciergerie, she was moved into a cramped cell where light came from a narrow slit and privacy had ceased to exist. Guards watched, visitors were restricted. Her clothes were replaced by coarse garments. Her hair was cut, not as a mercy, but as a symbol that she was stripped of rank and identity. Medical observers at the time noted changes: weight loss, bouts of hemorrhaging, and appearance of exhaustion and declining health. Revolutionary physicians recorded symptoms like weight loss and hair loss, but historians caution against overinterpreting these as evidence of specific tortures. They were consistent with prolonged stress, poor diet, and the filth common in prison. The effect, however, on a woman already accustomed to the rituals and appearances of royalty was a progressive erasure of the exterior markers that had once defined her status. And then came the trial. The Revolutionary Tribunal at that point had transformed into theater. Fouquier Tinville, the public prosecutor, presided over proceedings that combined legal formality with the hunger of a public ready for denunciation. Charges were drawn wide: conspiracy against the state, acts of treason, and crimes against the people. Among these, the accusation that drew the most primal outrage was the claim of maternal depravity, the incest charge. It was an accusation that, if believed, would not only vilify Marie Antoinette, but also justify the tearing of her family as an act of political necessity. How was such testimony produced? A close reading of trial transcripts and contemporary commentary makes clear that the tribunal sought witnesses willing to assert the worst. The boy's statements, under the pressure of his custody and the interrogations he endured, were crafted into a narrative that suited prosecutors and inflamed the crowd. Historians point out that the accounts were inconsistent, that memory under duress is unreliable, and that the whole enterprise was suffused with coercion. The courtroom reaction was immediate: gasps, shouts, the collapse of public sympathies that might once have softened some jurors. Marie Antoinette, in the face of this, offered a maternal appeal. According to witnesses present, she addressed the women in the court, speaking not as a queen but as a mother. She pleaded that her children be spared revenge. What she could not control was the machine of revolutionary retribution, already set in motion and unyielding. There were moments of small dignity that refused to be staged out of her. In the thin light of the conciergerie, she composed herself. She dictated and signed papers. She asked about the welfare of her children with the same raw concern as any parent. She wrote letters.
One of these documents, a longer letter penned in the hours before her death, survives in fragments and in testimony. It is a letter that, according to archival records and memoirs, was intended as a final testament of forgiveness and counsel. In it she spoke of love for her children, of her wish that they not seek vengeance, and of resignation to a fate she had not chosen. That letter, historians note, was intercepted and did not reach all its intended recipients, which added to the cruelty. Even the last human attempt at reaching family was diverted by the very system that had condemned her. Approach the content of that letter with the reverence of source material. Marie-Thérèse later reproduced passages in her memoirs. The tone is not theatrical. It is plain, maternal, and full of the practical concerns of a parent who sees the shape of ruin ahead. The fact that prison officials withheld or intercepted correspondence only underscores the deliberate isolation imposed upon her, a final silencing of a private voice. The morning of October 16th began with the ritual of preparation that was customary before a public execution, but charged with a uniquely humiliating symbolism in her case. Prison records document that she was dressed in a plain white garment, often described as a chemise, the funerary white that removed the last trappings of rank. Her hair was cut short, a practical measure in the eyes of officials, but it also functioned as a symbolic severing of identity. Her hands were restrained, and she was led to the cart that would take her through Paris. The procession itself is recorded by a range of witnesses. The cart moved through streets lined by people whose attitudes that day were not uniform. Some shouted epithets, others watched in silence, and a few wept as a woman they had known from courtly pageants now appeared as a condemned criminal.
Artists and sketchmakers, including contemporaries associated with revolutionary art circles, made renderings of the scene. Those images capture a woman who kept a composure that confounded the crowd's expectation of dramatic collapse. According to observers, at one point she accidentally stepped on the foot of the man assisting her. She looked at him and apologized. The widely reported words, translated into English by contemporary witnesses, were simple. "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." The apology in that moment was extraordinary, a final human gesture to a stranger as she moved toward her death. The blade fell, but what is most terrifying is not that death came. Death is the end of every revolution's list of victims, but that the process before the blade was an attempt to erase or corrupt every remaining human tie.
The long campaign of psychological coercion, the use of a child as an instrument of accusation, the staging of a public trial where evidence was manufactured or forced, the interception of private letters, these acts together demonstrate a systematic project. The revolutionaries wanted, in effect, to convert intimacy into testimony, to transform filial love into proof of monstrous guilt. That is a cruelty designed not only to execute a person, but to unmake their story. We must say this plainly. The incest accusation is not an established fact. It is a claim produced in an environment of coercion and show trials. Trial records and later scholarship reveal the ways testimony was manipulated. Modern historians who study the Revolutionary Tribunal emphasize the theater of the court and the political utility of startling allegations. The child's statements, made while he was under the control of authorities who had an interest in securing a conviction, cannot be treated as independent, reliable evidence. To present them otherwise would be to mistake a performance for truth. Yet it is equally important to reject a simplistic inversion that turns Marie Antoinette into an unsullied saint. She was a public figure whose actions and the policies of the monarchy contributed to the fury of revolution. Her lifestyle and her court made her an obvious target. The nuance we must hold is that public culpability does not erase private humanity. The same woman who represented the Ancien regime was also a mother, fearful and grieving, confronted by procedures designed to crush her as a symbol and a person. If we step back and read the arc of those 76 days, a strategy emerges. First, isolate. Cut off conversation, allies, and information. Second, reframe identity. Give the child a custodian whose job is to erase previous loyalties. Third, manufacture narrative. Produce testimony that will shock the public and justify an extreme sentence. Fourth, stage the demise, so that the spectacle reads as moral certainty. Each step fed the next. Each step aimed to do more than kill a queen. It aimed to produce a definitive image that would be remembered and believed. Even so, Marie Antoinette's last hours contain small resistances that complicate the script the revolutionaries intended. Her letters, to the extent they survive or were recorded by her daughter, are not pleas for theatrical martyrdom or bitter recrimination. They are appeals to the humanity of those who would survive her, and a request that vengeance not be their guide. In the brief, human intervals on the cart and in the cell, she offered gestures of apology and simple tact. Those acts, the apology to the man who helped her, the concern for her children's future, the request for forgiveness, form a counter-narrative to the revolutionaries' attempt at total erasure.
They reveal a woman who, even in the final humiliation, maintained an ethical integrity that refused to be wholly consumed by the political fire around her. What then is the terror in all this? It is not only that a ruler was executed, it is that an entire set of institutions turned intimacy into a weapon. The revolutionaries could have executed a queen on political grounds and been done with it. They chose instead to pierce the private life of a mother and use that intimacy to justify public fury. That choice reveals a political logic more chilling than a single blade, the willingness to rewrite family bonds into instruments of state power, the readiness to place a child on a witness stand when the child was a captive, the orchestration of a court that sought spectacle over truth. There is also a deeper ethical question that follows us beyond the historical facts. How do we, as observers, treat the records of such a moment? The duty is to be faithful to sources while being mindful of the contexts that produce them. When testimonies are extracted under duress, when letters are intercepted, when the press is partisan, the historian's work is to hold the tension between what is recorded and what was coerced.
We must resist the temptation to convert every fragment of evidence into moral clarity. Instead, we must accept ambiguity, recognize manipulation, and let that awareness inform how we judge the past. After the execution, images of Marie Antoinette circulated in a new way, not as the queen of powdered wigs and sumptuous gowns, but as an emblem of vulnerability smuggled into a national narrative that needed a villain. In the long arc of memory, the details of those 76 days complicate that image. They show a political machine willing to weaponize a child and to manufacture confessions in order to justify its own certainty. They show a woman who, under unimaginable pressure, behaved in ways that underline both her human frailty and a tenacious moral presence. So when next we think of the guillotine, when headlines or popular culture reduce her fate to a single moment of mechanical justice, we should remember that the true terror was the slow, systematic unraveling of a life. The child taken at night, the forced convertings of language, the stripping of a name into the ledger entry 280, the letter that never reached its destination, the staged courtroom and the manipulations within it. These are the acts that extended the violence long before the blade. That is the terrifying truth about her last moments. They were not confined to minutes, but stretched across weeks of calculated psychological warfare designed to do more than execute a body. They aimed to destroy a personhood and then to make the world believe it had been done for the sake of justice. Endings are complicated. The revolutionaries achieved their immediate aim. The queen was dead, the crowd dispersed, the schedule of terror continued.
But the image they tried to create did not fully erase the flickers of human complexity. The letters preserved, the apologies recorded, the composed face on the card, these became inconvenient facts in a story that otherwise sought easy villains. Over time, those facts allowed future generations to ask difficult questions about power, justice, and cruelty. If you want more deep dives into history's darkest acts and the human stories hidden inside them, subscribe and stay with us for more investigations that refuse simplistic answers. After hearing this, how do you now see Marie Antoinette? Villain, victim, or something more complicated? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who cares about the tangled border between public justice and private suffering.